All right, so general information about the closing process and project completion. Effectively, this whole entire final phase is really about delivering exactly what you have promised to all the relevant stakeholders and to finally close off all your administration procedures and then to also conduct an evaluation. The problem with this is that a lot of entertainment projects in particular either don't have the time, resources, or inclination to even bother evaluating what just happened. They'll just move straight on to the next thing. Okay. Evaluating is not a hindrance to you. It's something that does help and should help build you over a period of time. Okay? By understanding what went right, what went wrong, what can we understand and learn from that, what you're trying to do is effectively reduce your mistakes the next time around. Okay? Or at least understand where we should be more proactive to avoid certain things actually happening. Okay? It's an important process, and unfortunately not everyone does actually do it. All right, so within this process, you also have some legal obligations as well. Okay? This is where for all of your contracted employees, to suppliers, to other industry partners and stakeholders, this is where you're effectively wrapping everything up in a legal sense. Okay? The contract is completed, everything has been fulfilled to that particular standard. Okay? Everyone else has signed off in that capacity. Okay? That is really what you are looking for. Now, the closing process doesn't always have to be considered or thought of at, this is just something we do at the very end of the project. Okay? Essentially, you could also do mini closures, and some projects do, at the end of each particular phase. Okay? Let's review and evaluate. Let's review and evaluate. We're closing this off. Let's review and evaluate. Okay? Particularly if the projects are a couple of years long, you need a couple of those particular evaluative phases within there. Okay? There's also, within project closure, project termination, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later, but effectively it means that for whatever reason the project was cancelled. Okay? Even in that circumstance, you still do need to undertake some form of evaluation. Now, typically, this is what the closure process will usually look like. Within this, we call it benefit realization. So within benefit realization, realistically, what this means is a lot of your team is starting to move on to other projects. They're being released and off their contracts. You're delivering all the final deliverables to the client, and you'll effectively be getting the final payments. Okay? So everyone is effectively getting their final benefits. Okay? It is starting to become real, and the project has actually come to a definitive end. All right. Now, within this process, you need to be thinking about also, depending on what area you're in within entertainment, you need to be thinking about your procurement as well and your resources plan. If you have, and this obviously depends on your project, an ongoing relationship with suppliers that is almost a week-by-week thing until the project ends, you need to consider that because you need to terminate those kind of contracts. Okay? They may not be a once-off. So you need to consider procurement, you need to be considering the deliverables / objectives overall, you need to be considering financial resources and your overall evaluation. Now, when you think about the overall evaluation or the audit, as we call about what you'll be doing, it could be conducted in a number of different ways. It could be conducted by the team, okay, internally as a team, or it could be externally. There could be an external team, part of a larger company, part of a particular stakeholder that might have a lot of financial investment within your project that actually wants to undertake a third-party evaluation of what happened. Okay. That can sometimes happen, and it will for those projects that do have a larger financial commitment. Now, what is also important and what people don't always consider within this process is the archiving of information. Okay. So when you come through to additional projects or next projects, you have essentially a repository of information you can go to where you've saved everything that's happened throughout that process and you can easily access that information. Okay? That is something that can take a little bit of time to actually undertake. And it is a relatively boring process as well. So something that not a lot of people will want to actually undertake, okay, as part of that overall final closure process. But it is actually important. Because when you get to those other projects, and as we talked about, if you remember at the start of the semester, a lot of what we talk about in terms of scheduling or objectives, finance, etc., a lot of it is based on what you've done previously. So you do need easy access to that information. Okay, key tasks for you, and this is important obviously for A3, these are some of the areas that you should really consider in terms of areas for improvement. Okay? Is there need for improvement within our resources? Whether it's procurement, equipment, or was it human-based? Okay? What about planning and documentation? Were there problems within the documentation that we undertook? Were there problems within the planning process? Was there problems within the original pitching process, within our original scope? Okay. Think about the reporting mechanisms that you've also used as well. Or has there been a lack of reporting mechanisms that you've also used? Okay. Risk management. What happened? What actually became realised? How did you actually deal with it? And what can you actually learn about risk from that process? What about quality assurance processes? Did you actually have any? Did you actually adhere to those standards? What did you learn about that? So as you think about those quality standards, you might have them. Maybe you didn't actually bother to use them in the project. And when you look at the evaluation and the feedback that you get later on, maybe it actually shows. Okay. And of course, team communication. Okay? Those are the prime areas that we would consider are where you're looking for in terms of improvement, okay, for your particular projects. All right. Criteria, typically used within project closure. Okay? When you enter an evaluation, you should have a set of criteria in order to evaluate it by. Okay? Otherwise, the evaluation is not going to be very useful at all. Okay? So number one, have you actually provided, and really this is what most of these points are about, what level of information have you provided? And how accurate is that information? Okay. Particularly if you're dealing with a team within larger teams, or you're dealing with a third-party external auditor. Okay. What information are you actually giving over to them? How much? Are you being realistic? Are you being truthful with the information? How much have you given over? Okay. And what is the level of accuracy of that information? Are you actually confident within the accuracy of the information that you're using to evaluate? How confident are you, i.e., in those sources that you have and that you're relying on to conduct that evaluation? That's important. What I would consider when you're trying to evaluate the consistency and the quality of that information is effectively look at different people within that process. Okay? What is everyone saying? It might be interviews, it might be focus groups, it could be internal surveys, it could be one-on-one informal chats. Whatever it is, it's about understanding everyone's perspective. Okay? And somewhere within that, you can understand effectively some level of consistency in feedback. Right. Okay. Also within project closure, when we think about criteria that you've set to undertake this process, have you actually outlined an action plan that you're going to undertake for project closure? Do you understand everything that needs to be done within this process? Okay. You do need some level of checklist to go off on. All right. Within that process, as I alluded to earlier, a lot of people, and particularly with entertainment, they'll actually leave the project early because they're effectively just going from project work to project work. Okay. So when the deliverables are done and they're handed off, they're effectively just looking for the next project to go off on. Okay. So within that process, who do you have left to effectively govern and give responsibility to actually undertake this closure process. Okay? So not just understanding what needs to be done, but who is actually going to be involved within that closure process as well. Okay? All right. Typically, there should be some final report, okay? Whether it is just for the pure benefit of internally for you, for the team, okay? Whether or not your project is part of a larger company, so it's actually really just part of good reporting processes, or whether those final reports are actually for external stakeholders that have contributed some financial obligation to you, you do need to consider some level of final reporting. Okay? That typically should include the overall assessment of the project. How do you think the overall performance actually went? Within that, you should then also reflect on and discuss the structure of the project. How do we structure it? Was it actually conducive and effective to what we wanted initially? Is there something there that we need to consider or realise for next time? What about the teams that you put together? Okay. A lot of people will want to understand and know where things went wrong, and they need an understanding of the teams. Okay, so you do need a report on them. Okay. Internally, administrative performance, this depends on the size of the team, okay, and how complex the project actually is and how many administrative processes you actually had. Quite frankly, a lot of the projects you might start out in the next couple of years are not going to have a lot of administration. And typically a lot of it is actually going to be done internally by yourself or by others. And techniques of project management. What effectively actually happened within leadership and within the skills and understanding of those people involved, okay, in terms of project management, not just creative skill, okay, or skill within that product set. All right. What you do need to consider, and this is why I've given you these kind of templates, is effectively it does all of this. All right. Give us an understanding of what the baseline was. Give us a degree to which you actually performed under, and then give us effectively a list of everything that you did deliver, the eventual quality standard of that, and then any future considerations. Okay? That's a typical generic specifications for what our final report should do. Okay? Some of them do not have to be very long, okay? But effectively it'll be up to you and what kind of reporting mechanisms you'd actually like to use as a group. Okay, that kind of leads us also to project termination. Okay? This is a closure process that you'll more than likely experience at some stage, and I hope you don't, but you will. Effectively, project termination is where the project ceases to exist in its current form. Okay? Either it's gotten to the point where the project has slowed so much that there's no point in actually continuing doing what you're doing, so you need to actually cancel it, or to the point that resources have run out, potentially financial structures have collapsed and you can no longer continue, or potentially that progress has not been to the standard that stakeholders have expected. So they've effectively pulled the plug on the project. So the project is done, is terminated. Okay? So that could happen at any stage. Any phase, any time, the project can be pulled and terminated. Okay? But it is still part of the closure process. All right? Why it is called termination is because it's effectively a permanent closure. There might be a chance that the project could be restarted at a later date, sure. But a lot of the time, it actually won't. Because effectively, and most of the time, it's about failure to meet expectations. That's really where a lot of those projects go wrong, to the point that it does actually need to be terminated. Now, it could be that at the start of the project, you might have misunderstood or undertook work that was beyond what you were capable of doing. The scope was effectively unrealistic. You took on too much. You didn't budget effectively. You didn't understand all of the work that needed to be done to actually achieve that. Okay? Or maybe you just didn't have the proper time frame as well in order to accomplish this project. Okay? there was a misunderstanding within that time frame at some point. Right. Now, even if the project is terminated, there is still closure that does need to happen. Okay? You still need to cut off contracts. You still need to maybe, hopefully, conduct an evaluation of what happened and why, so you can understand. And there will more than likely be legal ramifications, okay, that you will more than likely be involved in, okay, depending on your level and depth, okay, within the actual project. All right. Typical fundamental reasons for failure. Look, most of them are pretty self-evident and things that we've kind of peppered in throughout the semester, but effectively, a lot of the times, it'll be poor planning, poor management, poor communication, and lack of resources. They're typically the main four where projects will be led astray, either into full termination or to the fact that you got to the end, but the deliverables are to a very substandard quality. Okay? They are nowhere close to that quality assurance that you gave, okay? Or at least try to give in some capacity. All right. On the flip side of that, these are typically the success factors that will lead to and reinforce success within your project. Okay? And these are hopefully things that you might have actually experienced throughout your project as well. Okay? The ability to troubleshoot, i.e., you were able to effectively handle all problems that came up and you dealt with them effectively. You were able to effectively monitor, give feedback, and have a good grasp and hold over the organisation and structure and plan of the project. You understood what needed to happen, by what time, and to the certain dates and specifications that have been allocated. Okay. Also, it was a very clear project. You understood exactly what needed to happen, and you had a good level of top management support, i.e. the leadership was strong and it was effective. Okay? They understood what needed to happen and the support that needed to be given at certain stages. Okay.